Welcome, everybody, to our Avail Leadership podcast. It's so good to be here again, as always, bringing amazing leadership content for all you leaders out there. My name is Virgil Sierra. I'm the Avail Leadership Media host. I'm also the pastor of Vertical Church, also known as Iglesia Vertical in South Florida, where we are one church, two languages. And at Avail Leadership, our aim is to guide today's Christian leaders in the art of leadership. And so if you are in leadership and you want to help take your organization and your team to new levels, this is a great place to be connected. I'm so excited to get into this conversation today with Pastor Dan Reiland. Pastor Dan is the executive pastor of 12 Stone Church in Lawrenceville, Georgia. He's been in leadership for decades. He's authored several books, including Confident Leader, which we'll be talking about today. Dan's impressive leadership history involves partnerships with John Maxwell, coaching, and all kinds of ministry leadership accolades. He loves the church. He loves his wife, Patty, and his children, Mackenzie and John Peter. And I'm a fan. DanReiland.com is a great place for resources for all church leaders. And so, Pastor Dan, we are so honored that you would take time to connect with us here at the Avail Leadership podcast. I've been waiting and excited for this opportunity. It would be amazing if you can just share a little bit about yourself for those who are new to the Dan Reiland world, a little bit about yourself, your story, and of course, this book, Confident Leader.
Thank you so much, Pastor Virgil. This is great to be here with you. And you're in Florida, right?
Yes, sir.
So we have something big in common. I'm a native, born and raised San Diegan boy.
Wow.
And so beaches and palm trees. Florida's close to my heart. When I see a palm tree, I feel like I'm close to home.
I hear you. I love them too.
Yeah, it was quite a transition. When you go from the Pacific Ocean and you trade that for the Chattahoochee River in Georgia, that is not, you either have been called by God or you're just not a smart person,
Hey, listen, God's creation is wonderful, but I got to agree, there's something about the ocean that is magnificent.
Yes. So, well, thanks for that introduction. You named my children, Mackenzie and John Peter, which, of course, they're both now late 20s, one's married. So I've got to tell you that we have our first grandchild.
Wow.
Yes. Our little granddaughter named Anza Mission, and she's just the coolest kid and 6 months old. But so yeah, native California, native San Diegan, born and raised there, grew up. And pursued, actually, my undergraduate work was criminal justice administration.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a private investigator for about a year. Anyways, wow. That's a whole other story. But God got a hold of me, and off to seminary I went, found myself connected to John Maxwell. That went for 20 years. Wow. We're still buds. He's still my coach and mentor, very close. We text and talk quite a bit. And in between the church in San Diego and here at 12 Stone, where I serve, as you mentioned, as exec pastor, we're a multi-site church with 8 campuses. I've been here 19 years, right?
Wow.
Long time. In between there, I was actually at North Point with Andy Stanley. I served as on the board, as an elder on the board, and he's just a brilliant leader, brilliant communicator. I learned so much there. And so here I am. I love the church. I love to coach leaders and develop leaders. Church is in my blood. And so anytime I get an invite from somebody like you to talk a little leadership, I'm in.
It's so good. We talked about it as we were preparing for this, how you have that passion, which I have as well, which is leadership, but then also the church, right? And being able to connect those two is so huge. And so this book, Confident Leader, I think is a resource that, no, I'll take that back. I know is a resource that every leader should have in their arsenal. Can you tell us a little bit about the story about Confident Leader and kind of what brought it about? What's your heart in it, and anything else that might be interesting for us to know about this book?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you. So let me ask you a question for that purpose. So are you a roller coaster fan by any chance?
I'm a huge roller coaster fan. My wife usually stays, with anybody who doesn't go on or holds the purses, but I am a huge roller coaster fan.
Yeah, my kids are. I started getting a little older, and And it's like, the last one I went on, this is probably like a baby one to you, but it only topped out at 67 miles an hour, but it was the Hulk at Universal down in
I
Orlando.
know the Hulk. That's fun.
Yes, that's fun. It's fun, but 67 miles an hour, they have them now that go over 100 miles an hour. I remember the last time we were on one, they tell you, take everything out of your pockets, nothing in it, because it will all fly out. It will all be gone. You'll lose everything. And my daughter, Mackenzie, who I love to death, said, no, Dad, my jeans are snug. My phone won't go. Now, this will date it, right? Do you remember the Razor phone? Do you remember the?
Yes, Motorola Razor.
Yes. I mean, if you had a Razor phone, that was cool back in the day.
Yeah, it was.
And to a teenager, that's coveted. We got launched, 0 to 40 miles an hour in 2 seconds.
Wow.
That Razor phone must have gone into outer space. We never saw it again. And roller coasters are an interesting picture of leadership confidence. The ups and downs, the highs and lows, the fast and the slows, and a lot. We kind of react to we hold on for dear life. We go, it's almost like a ride. Sometimes leaders feel they have no control over, and think about the day-to-day life of a leader, where you might be going into a meeting with conflict. You're looking at the offerings and going, oh my gosh, or maybe success, maybe it's overconfidence.
Yeah.
Or think about attendance right now in COVID. We're talking, one guy asked me recently, he said, so what's the attendance at 12 Stone? And I stopped. And for the first time in all 35 years of leadership, I said, I don't know. I don't know.
I was hoping that you would say that, because I don't feel like I'm the only one now.
Exactly. I mean, it's like, well, pre-COVID, I could, and so it's just, when a church leader says, I don't know how many people go to your church, my church. Well, that's a little bit of a shakeup kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so here's what I know with all the ups and downs. As a leadership coach, as somebody with great passion for leaders, here's what I know. We can have, even in COVID, a more consistent, authentic, steady, not boring, but steady, coming from the inside kind of leadership confidence. And that's really where it came from. Just watching leaders for all these years, the roller coaster of overconfidence, underconfidence, all that kind of thing. And by the way, whether you're overconfident or underconfident, both will get you in trouble. Neither one of those are any good. And that's where the book came from. And I could tell you some more things about writing it if you want, but that's kind of the heart of where it came from.
Yeah, and I remember you saying something about, like, it's not some confident leaders, not because leaders aren't confident, it's because it's just the up and down of it. And
right.
Even right now, I can give a prime example. This happened to me yesterday, of the time that we're recording this, and I got off of a phone call congratulating a brother from our church for his birthday, one of our leaders, and blessing him. I stepped out of the car literally 30 seconds later to embrace a couple who just lost their child, and so, again, whether it's emotional, whether it's, organizational, the ups and downs are there. So I want to get into some questions with you, because I think a lot of your experience, Dan, as a pastor, as a leader, is going to be so valuable here. Here's a question. What can leaders do, especially during this season that we're living in right now, to keep their thinking fresh and innovative, to avoid boxing themselves into a certain way of operating? I think this is important in this season.
I do too. Virgil, I think we have to keep, how do I say, our soul fresh if we're going to keep our thinking fresh. It really starts on the inside. We can manufacture it temporarily on the outside, but it's really on the inside. I think if we empty the well and we don't fill it back up again, it doesn't really matter how hard you work. You can work really hard, you can be godly, but your thinking will grow stale if you aren't filling it back up again. And sometimes we just try to work harder and harder, and that doesn't do it. So, and then I think we get freed up at a soul level through our walk with God, peace and poise over anxiety and insecurity, just because you're settled with God. And I'm not trying to make this all a super spiritual thing, but it really does start there. Just that peace and poise. I think a lot of leaders walk around today with what I call a low grade anxiety. They're not freaking out. They're solid. They're good. They're leaders, but it's just kind of in their gut, kind of in their spirit. It's just they're just a little off.
Yeah.
And then when I sit with somebody who's got a poise, they're just at ease, you can see the difference.
Yeah.
Here's what I think. When you have that, you're open to innovation and change. I think leaders in general are not resistant to change. They're not resistant to innovation. I think it's because they don't have the emotional margin to absorb anything new. There's no space to add anything new. But when you've got a little piece, a little margin to think, that's the foundation for change. That's what opens the door so that we can be innovative and think and change.
Yeah, I think that's important because innovation is so key, especially in these times, because we really can get stuck, and I think that's probably a word that a lot of pastors and leaders would use is I feel stuck. And so what you're proposing, what you're saying is kind of internally, you mentioned soul being fresh, which helps our thinking be fresh, will then create some space for that innovation.
Yeah, it makes us more receptive from the inside. I think so many leaders now are just overloaded.
Yeah.
And we can't appear like closed off from change. Like, no. Mm-hmm. And that's really not the case. There's no space to take it in.
Right.
Now there is an external part of that. Sometimes that they're just doing too much. And the way to be receptive to innovation and change is to, if they're going to add something, drop something. If they're going to change something, create some space and time so they have time to launch the change. And obviously there's an entirely other aspect to it we can talk about or not, but the entirely other aspect is to be around innovative leaders, be around change-oriented kinds of leaders, be around people who are not afraid to make a change.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that that's one of the reasons I hear it a lot in leadership conferences is the people we have around our table is important, right? Mm-hmm. And it's good to have somebody who's asking questions or who's saying, hey, can't we do this in a different way? Because it challenges us. We're talking here with Pastor Dan Reiland, and we are addressing Confident Leader, which is this most recent book, which, by the way, I think everybody needs to get this. We'll talk a little bit more about how they can get that later. Okay, here's the next question, Dan. How does confidence in a leader change during difficult seasons, kind of like the one we're in? And does it look different than it might look during calmer times or stable times?
It does, because so much has changed. There's a difference between an insecure leader and a leader who's insecure in a moment. We all have insecurities. All leaders have insecurities. Some leaders have, a little bit of insecurity. Some leaders have a lot of insecurity. Mm-hmm. But that's different. Somebody who's just an insecure person, that's different than an insecure moment. Even all these years, as a young leader, I definitely was insecure for sure. I think God's done a lot over the years. I've been blessed with great mentors, but I still have insecure moments, right?
Yeah.
And in the same way, there's a difference between a leader who just lacks confidence, just flat out lacks confidence, and a leader who is lacking confidence in the moment or in a season. And I think we're in that season for a lot of leaders right now. I think I've sort of coined an idea in my head of what's the new overload or the new overwhelm. And it's three things, and I've been testing it out, and it's kind of landing with a lot of the leaders. It's unanswered questions, unsolved problems, and unknown future.
Say that again. That's good. I'm writing these down.
It's unanswered questions, unsolved problems, and unknown future. It's the new overload and the new overwhelm. It's the big idea, Virgil, is that life is perpetually undone. Nothing resolves. It's kind of like in music. We need a resolve. It wants to come back to an end, to a place that it's supposed to, and life is not letting that happen. It's this perpetual unanswered questions, unsolved problems, unknown future. That's different. We've been in this now, for 5 months?
Yeah.
5 months. And so here's the good news. Let me give one other piece first. This sustained thing, this sustained undone, this sustained uns, that elevates what the normal frustrations. We all live with frustrations, worries and fears and discouragements and, even some anxieties and fears. but this elevates it. Even anger now. One staff member said about her spouse, and this described it so perfectly. I mean, I couldn't believe it. She said, "My husband is so mad, but he doesn't know who to be mad at." Doesn't that just describe it?
Yeah.
You're just mad, but you don't know who to be mad at.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, here's the good news for us as leaders is, or you who are listening, all of us, is you are not expected to lead perfectly. Nobody's asking that of you.
Yeah.
What you're being asked to do is to do your best to make progress in the right direction. That's it. Do your best to make progress. We are counting on you to make progress. We really are. So do your best to make progress in the right direction. That's what we're looking for. That's what those you lead, that's what they're looking for, not perfection.
You know, I think as leaders, sometimes we do bring that on ourselves, that not only the desire, but the pressure to be perfect. You know, I know that when I mess up on something, or if I make a decision that doesn't turn out the way that I was hoping it would, I can easily get on myself. Right. And, you know, and this is, you know, I guess, depending on our personalities, that can happen. Can you share some tips, Dan, on how leaders can alleviate that pressure when they're, you know, that they're under, you know, and maintain a healthy state of being, even in the midst of crisis or challenging circumstances? What are some tips?
Yeah, it's a great connected thought here. I think first, let's just say this, that pressure is not a bad thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pressure is not a bad thing. All leaders we all experience pressure. And so the idea here is kind of like conflict. The idea isn't to avoid conflict, it's to learn how to resolve conflict.
Yeah.
And so here, you know, whether it's external pressure or internal pressure, they're both different. You know, internal pressure, that's the pressure, that's expectations you put on yourself. External pressure that's the expectations other people put on you.
Yeah.
In this case, pressure, it's the question is, what do you do when it gets too high? That's what we want to talk about for a minute. I don't know if, you know, I'm not much of a cook, but my wife is incredible at cooking. But you probably know what a pressure cooker is.
Yes.
You know, and there's the relief valve on it because there's so much pressure. If that relief valve isn't there, the thing can blow. Literally, the food can just go everywhere. But there's a pressure relief valve, and the key is to figure out how to have a pressure relief valve for a leader before you blow, So what I want to talk about for just a minute, maybe, or responding to your question, is to adopt a healthy pressure relief valve and know how to use it before it's too late. So we all know what unhealthy relief valves are, right? We all understand what we do that are unhealthy.
We know it when we see it.
we know exactly what I'm talking about. I'll use one that's a little lighter because we know all the ones that we don't even want to talk about right now. But you know, I started calling myself, I'm in pretty good shape. I run a 5K every day. And so I try to eat healthy. My wife's a vegan, right? So, but I've started calling myself like the COVID eating machine. You know, I'm working out of the house now. And so I get up and I have breakfast and I start working and I'm working away and it feels like it's time for lunch and it's 10:30 in the morning. You know, and you're at home, and, you know, it's like, oh, let's just eat, let's have a little snack. And I go, what am I doing? You know, we know what unhealthy stuff is.
Yeah.
But what's your healthy? Let me just toss out some super practical examples for all of us. Like here's a few, I don't know how many we'll do. Like a healthy relief valve would be a trusted friend you can talk to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's just somebody you can just talk to? They're trusted, they're smart, they're strong. Another one would be, you know, somebody to help you lead. Too many leaders feel like they're alone, even when they've got leaders around them. There's somebody who will help you lead. There's somebody who will step up. If you're in a little church or in a big church, somebody will help you do what God's called you to do. And, you know, something to enjoy. What is it that you enjoy? Maybe, you know, I don't know, you know, what's a hobby. I don't want to sound trite, but God made joy. God made life to be enjoyed. You know, you can't stay in all the all the undones and not put in a little bit of fun and enjoyment. Now this one may be unpopular, but I'm going to put it on the list, is exercise. Exercise is really great to alleviate stress.
Yeah.
I'll give you one more. You could probably add some to the list, I'm sure, Virgil, is quiet.
Yeah.
I don't know about you and your life and your leadership as a senior pastor, but I don't have a lot of quiet.
Yes.
I'm going, and that's part of me, type A, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of space unless we go make the space
Right.
to just be quiet. But those are ideas of a pressure relief valve for the men and women, the leaders who are listening, that they know what it is and they use it before it's too late.
That's really good. And I think a word that I would add to what you just said is intentionality, which is what you're implying, because unless we could know, I could know about the release valve, but if I'm not intentional in saying, hey, I need this, and I'm preaching to myself here, right? Because there's two things. I know one of them you're gonna connect with me on for sure, but there's two things that really are life-giving to me, which is playing basketball, and I don't do it as much as I should, and I wish I could, right?
Yeah.
And also playing guitar.
Yes, the second one.
Yes, that's the one. I had a feeling you're gonna like that one. You're a guitar guy, right? You like guitars?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so something as simple as, like you're saying, just putting in the calendar some space to recreate, to rest, to enjoy, can sometimes be that release that we need.
Yeah. And if I could come back and add something to that too,
doing
it without guilt. There's just, it's so easy for us, for you, maybe you're like me, but it's too easy to put guilt on you and don't put guilt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just gotta, because sometimes we feel guilty because, well, what are people gonna think because I'm doing this when I should be working or should be doing more things, But I think there comes that personal health aspect, which is important. These are good tips, for everybody, but young leaders, if you can tap into this early on, you're gonna save yourself a lot of ache, a lot of body ache, soul ache, and spirit ache, in the journey, because some people don't learn this. As they're growing and going through the years in their leadership, some people don't learn this soon enough. And addressing young leaders, Dan, you're an experienced leader. You've discovered a lot of strategies that work in regards to building teams, in regards to continuously growing. What advice would you give to leaders who want to grow their capacity, but they're still kind of at the beginning of their journey? They're still kind of spinning the wheels, maybe not even with a leadership title, but have an aspiration or have a vision or in a new role. What advice for growing capacity, which I think is also connected to confidence some way?
It is. I love this question. I love working with young leaders. There's 2 or 3 specific groups that this book is designed for. One of them is young leaders. Another one is, it's a very specific group, is leaders who develop leaders. So for the young leaders, this is great. For leaders who develop leaders, it's great. There's more, but they're very targeted and written for these kinds of groups. But anyway, I love it because we have a residency, a 2-year residency for young ministry students coming out of college with us. And so we've got 29 residents with us, and they're just awesome. I love working with the residents. but I also have a lot of experience and here and across the country, and a surprising number of young leaders get frustrated because they're not promoted fast enough.
Right.
And sometimes I want to say, you've been here for 8.5 minutes. Just, it's just enjoy it, take. So, but seriously, they want a seat at the table. The young leaders want a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And we, the old leader, I'm the old leader, right? Those of us who are in senior leadership, we're the ones responsible to develop the job, to raise them up and develop them and give them a place in leadership. That's our job, to particularly, older leaders handing the baton and because they are the future. That's our job, and we need to do that. But from the young leaders, a couple of things that I almost always share. Well, I'll give you 2 and then maybe a couple other things after that are a little bit different. Number 1 is build the ministry that you were chosen for, rather than get frustrated for the thing that you want that you haven't been given yet. So number 1 is take the ministry you were given and build it.
Yeah.
Don't get frustrated about the thing that you want but haven't been given yet. And then right with that is enjoy it.
Yeah.
You gotta have both, because I call it the fruit and joy, results and joy,
Uh-huh.
because with fruit or results without joy is drudgery,
Uh-huh.
and you'll never go the distance like that. You'll never leap for 35 years like that. You can't go the distance.
Of
And if
course.
you have joy without fruit, well, I'm glad you're having a party, dude. But you know what I mean? It's like that isn't going to work either. So you got to have both. And so that combination to build what you've been selected for, rather than being frustrated about what you weren't given. Because here's what I promise everybody here, and it's true. And I think in most leadership development environments, if you build something and you have a joyous spirit, you will get noticed,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
The more common thoughts would be find a coach, find a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say maybe one other thing. Well, we could talk about this for an hour, but one other thing comes to mind, and that is hold off on giving answers until people ask you questions. That's a great way for
Good
a
advice.
young leader to go farther. Yeah. So
Very good advice. You were mentioning something, because we were kind of directing right now towards the younger leaders or the newer leaders.
yeah,
And you mentioned about how, a lot of times they want a seat at the table, and this is a good thing. And then as maybe as veteran leaders or lead leaders, providing the space for that, some leaders might consider that risky, right? Some leaders might consider that something risky, and not just that, but other decisions or other adjustments, because when we're comfortable where we are, it will sometimes keep us from stepping out of that comfort zone and maybe taking risks. How would you describe the role of risk taking in leadership, and why is risk taking so essential if we want to be effective?
yeah, yeah. I think we could sum it up this way, maybe to start, is that the nature of leadership involves being out in front. And when you're out in front, if you're, it's kind of like if we had a whiteboard here, I could write like a letter A here and an arrow and letter B. And letter A is whether maybe you're leading a department or a student ministry or a small group or a campus or senior pastor. Letter A is where you're at right now, where the people are at right now. Letter B is where God is telling you to take them. And the journey between the two is the journey that the leader takes first. The leader always goes first. The leader's always out in front. That's the idea. The nature of leadership is being out in front. So you're always looking at B while the people are living in A, right? And you're figuring out, okay, what problems have to be solved? What resources do I need? What relationships need to be created? You're out here figuring it out. And of course, what wears on some leaders is they go, yes, I've got it. We can do it. And then God reminds us all, now go back and get the people, because you got to go take them with you,
Nobody's with you.
Nobody's with you yet. So, but here's the point. The risk is, if you're really leading, if you're really out in front, the real like rubber meets the road definition is, you are taking the people, you and the people are going somewhere you've never been before.
Right.
Even if maybe you as the leader, maybe you've been there before, but you and this group of people, they've never, if you're actually leading, now that's the word. If you're just doing the same thing with the same people over and over again, that's not leading.
Right.
But if you're taking them somewhere and that means you're going somewhere you've never been before, there's risk involved, because you don't know what's out there. And so that's a long-winded answer, but what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to make progress, if you're going to go somewhere, there's risk involved.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not called to go and take people where they've already been as leaders.
Right. And so the nature of that, if you're making a trip that you've never done before, there's going to be risk.
So good.
You don't know the answers.
Yeah. And that's part of the adventure of leadership, right? That we don't always know what's ahead, but that's why we need leaders. That's why we need people that are willing to lead. This leads good into the next question that I have for you, because there's challenges right now in the current situation. One of the things that's been limited is being together in person in groups, and obviously as a church, this feels like it's almost like like the worst thing that can happen for a church community.
Yep.
What advice would you give to leaders who are looking to connect and build community during this time, or even find or cultivate a support system when it's so hard to be in person? What advice, what tips could you bring in?
Yeah. First of all, I couldn't agree with you more. It's vital. The word that comes to my mind, you said before, initiative. The word that comes to my mind is kind of in the same ballpark as proactive.
Yeah.
Do anything you've got to do. Beg, borrow, steal. Just and the one of the things to get practical about that is, I get to be in a lot of XP groups. I organize XP groups. I'll mentor XP groups. And I'll hear people say, "Well, I'm not in a group. How do you get in a group? How do you get in a group?" Don't wait. If you're not in a group, don't wait until someone invites you. Go make one. It's not hard. Just start one. Literally, just if you're a campus pastor or a worship leader, and get on the phone and call some churches around your city or around the country, and just say, "Hey, we're going to meet every X amount of whatever during COVID or whatever you might want to, what your idea is." And I'm Zooming a new group right now about maybe every, I don't know how many weeks we're deciding right now, but we get on Zoom. Now, you mentioned that. Is that ideal? No. But in COVID, it really works.
Right.
And when you're talking to your tribe, five men and women, 6, 10, that you Zoom in and you start sharing ideas, it is life-giving. So if you're not invited into a group, go make one and Zoom. I've been organizing them and been in these groups for over 30 years. And I'm telling you, there's nothing like it.
Yeah. There's a power, there's a synergy, there's even brotherhood kind of can build up, and sisterhood, can build up, even though it's not physically face-to-face in person. But, with today's technology, I mean, imagine if we were going through this without the technology, then that would be a whole nother story. But you're right. Taking initiative.
Yeah. Just, and somebody might say, "Well, that's, I don't know who to call." Yes, you do. Just there's, who to call, and I don't want to belabor it, but I am a little bit, because it's so important. It's so important. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that, true life transformation happens in the context of relationships, not just information. And that's why we see this in the way Jesus lived his life and the way that he modeled it with the disciples. And he always was intentional about that. And I think that building community is something that we can't afford not to fight for or not to initiate. And as leaders, I think we should be modeling that for the rest of the community. I want to switch gears here a little bit, Dan, because I'll just be honest with you. As somebody who's kind of watched from a distance and seen and heard about you, Dan, I can imagine that you have stories. You have many, some might even implicate people, so you don't have to go there, but can you share maybe a funny story or a funny experience from your beginning leadership journey, whether it was way back in the day when you didn't even know you were a leader, or just kind of starting off as a pastor and in leadership? Sure. Is there anything funny that comes to mind?
Sure. I'll give you a short one. It's actually a short one, but it's a double header. So you ready for that?
All right, I'm ready.
So Mike, I'm out of seminary, my first year out of seminary, and John Maxwell was his second year at the church in San Diego.
Uh-huh.
And so he started an internship. And here's my claim to fame. I broke John Maxwell's internship.
Nice.
I was the first intern under John and the last. He brought me in, I was the intern, and whatever he saw in the experience, he closed the internship and never started it again. So my claim to fame is I killed John Maxwell's intern program. Now, there's redemption.
Okay.
At the conclusion of my first year, he said, "Dan, I want you to come on the team and stay with me." And that was 19 more years, for 20 years together. So something good happened. But in that first year, when I was the intern that shut down the John Maxwell's intern program, I got invited to the platform. Now, I'm just a rookie kid. I don't know. This is back in the day when we wore suits and tie. This is like 1982 or 3 or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the pastors some of them would sit up on the platform.
On the stage, yeah, I remember.
You remember? Yeah, okay. And so I got, I'm this kid, and I got invited, and there's John Maxwell, and he's preaching, and I got invited on the stage to read scripture.
Wow.
And so I opened the Bible and I read it, and I just thought I killed it. But I'm kind of, I don't want to just stare at my notes. I'm looking at my notes right now. You don't want to just stare at your notes the whole time. So I was looking up at the people and looking at my notes. It was a long passage. And I could tell the people were kind of like going like, they're kind of like, I couldn't understand what they were, so I finished reading the scripture, and I walked down to sit by my wife, Patty, in the pew, right?
Uh-huh.
And I leaned over to her, and I felt sweaty because my intuitive nature said something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I leaned over. I said, "How did I do, hon? How did I do? Did I read good? How did I do?" And she said, "Oh, sweetie, you read great. You were awesome." And I said, "Great." And about 3 minutes later, she goes, "But you read the wrong scripture."
Oh my goodness.
I just think, no. But anyway,
this is what happens.
It's what happens.
And I'll just add to this, because I know exactly what you're saying. Young leaders, you will have these moments, and when you're living them in the moment, it stinks, and you don't want to be in there. But later, as time goes by, you can tell the story and laugh about it, right, Dan?
You can tell it later. In the moment, you're right. It wasn't funny in the moment, but not when I said, "What?" But now it's a fun, silly story, and who cares? And yeah.
Hey, I want to close off with one more question, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Avail Journal. But I want to ask one last question. Again, your book is Confident Leader.
Yeah.
So it's important to be confident, but how can a leader be confident, but also aware of weaknesses or faults at the same time? Is there a balance that's healthy there? Is this something that you've experienced?
Yeah. Good question. That balance between, the humility, awareness of flaws and faults and things,
Mm-hmm.
and yet confidence, awareness of what God has put in you and given you, and your calling and your gifts. I think that balance is what keeps us away from overconfidence and underconfidence. Your flaws and your faults, my flaws and my faults, actually help build your confidence. And I'll tell you why, how that works is when we just kind of admit our stuff, right? We just kind of own our stuff. Everybody got stuff. When we just kind of own it, the flaws, all that kind of stuff, it makes us human.
Yeah.
So we're self-aware. It makes us human. And when you're human, it lets you be real, which is one of the first steps to confidence, just being the real you.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's the leaders who try to be perfect who get in so much trouble, or leaders who try to perform who get in trouble, or, the performance trap, all that kind of stuff. Your mistakes, my mistakes, our mistakes help us learn and grow, and God fills in the gaps. He fills in the gaps. I mean, one of the narratives in the book is in 3 parts, and there's 3 biblical narratives that go along with it, with Moses, David, and Nehemiah, kind of attached to each chapter in each of the parts. And I think Moses was arguably the greatest leader in all of history, at least biblically. And look at how he had no confidence whatsoever. And then God had to go back over and over and over and over and over. But he finally kind of got in touch with who he was, and God filled in the gaps. And that just sustained him. And I think ultimately it's that partnership with God that pulls it all together.
That's so good. And I think it's so true. One of the things that I'm really pulling out of this conversation with you today is that sometimes we look at, underconfidence is bad, and we tend to think overconfidence is good. But the reality is that those 2 extremes are both dangerous. I want to just take a moment here, Dan, and just say thank you for leading so well, and thank you for producing and providing resources that we can have in our hands and dig into and really learn and grow as leaders. I really want to encourage people to get the book. It's Confident Leader, and you can find that on Amazon. They can find that on Amazon, right, Dan?
Oh yeah, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, Confident Leader by Dan Reiland. I also want to encourage everybody to go to danreiland.com. There's a wealth of information and knowledge, and even some great resources. As a church leader, I have been blessed by danreiland.com, and I suggest that if you haven't been there, you check it out. Again, the book is Confident Leader. You can get it on Amazon. I also want to take a moment. I want to mention the Avail Journal. The Avail Journal. Anybody watching the video of the podcast can see I'm holding one right here with Dr. Sam Chan on the cover. The Avail Journal is a resource that we are producing at Avail that has great content, amazing articles, great leadership principles throughout the whole journal. I know, Dan, that you have helped to contribute to articles in the Avail Journal as well as to our Avail Leadership platform online. By the way, if you didn't know, you can get a free annual subscription of the Avail Journal by going to availjournal.com. availjournal.com. You can get a free annual subscription. We gotta wrap this up here, Dan, but I know that you wrote an article called Know Yourself. Is that a good read for our leaders?
I think so. I'm biased, but I think so. I tell you, if I can, I love the Avail Journal. I got my first copy, the July copy. It's just gorgeous. First of all, I mean, it
feels good too.
It's wonderful. But article after article after article, just top quality. But yes, I was fortunate to have an article in there, and kind of goes to self-awareness, really. And I think seeing yourself accurately, the title of the article is Know Yourself, but it's about self-awareness. I think seeing yourself accurately is vital to self-awareness.
Yeah.
And as a leadership development church for our staff and for the leadership in the church, we start everything in leadership development starts with self-awareness, everything.
Yeah.
If you lack self-awareness, you might know how to do leadership, but you don't necessarily know how to be a leader.
Yeah.
And doing leadership, recruiting, developing strategy, training, you can just be a smart guy and or gal, woman and do leadership, but that's not going to sustain when you are a leader.
Yeah.
That's more like reading a room, intuitive. You know if people like you, if they don't like you, if they trust you, if they don't trust you. You know how to add the right value to the right person at the right time. That's more the instincts of a leader. And that only comes from self-awareness.
So good. So you guys can check that out in our Avail Journal. Again, free annual subscription if you go to availjournal.com. This has been such a great journey with you in this podcast, Dan. We have about a minute to wrap it up here. Any last final comments or thoughts you want to share with all the leaders that are connected with us?
Oh my, I think I'll tap into something we just touched on, and that is just, God made you exactly right. Be yourself. The best way to connect with people, which is really the beginning of all your leadership, it's the beginning of all your influence, obviously under God's power and authority, is connection. And for you to just be who you are, be yourself. People like you best when you're you. Not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to like you, but people like you best when you're you. And my prayer would be, if I could be your coach for 10 seconds, is to just you be you, and God's going to lead best through that person. Yeah.
That's so good. Great advice from Dan Reiland. I would say he's a leader of leaders. Dan, thank you so much for your time with us. Thank you for just investing in leaders. I think I don't say this lightly, and I think it's important for you to hear this. I'm sure at church, and people around you probably affirm you, but you're really making a difference, Dan. And I think you've been making a difference for a long time, and you have a lot more difference to make. But just speaking as somebody who's just recently maybe met you personally, but I've been blessed indirectly just by your website, just by the articles you've written and the leadership resources that you've put out there. And I know that I'm not alone. So thank you on behalf of Christian leaders, the ones that have been close and maybe know you, and also the ones that maybe don't know you personally, and the ones that are meeting you now, because I think what God's placed in you is really a gift, to us as church leaders. And I really want you to hear that. And I want you to know that at Avail Leadership, we really appreciate you, and we honor you, and we thank you for just for your investment in the kingdom. It really means a lot.
I appreciate that encouragement and the kind words. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Hey, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Being with Pastor Dan Reiland has been such a blessing. Pastor Dan, thank you for spending this time with us. The book is Confident Leader. You can get it at Amazon. Find it easy. You can also go to danreiland.com. That's Dan, REILAND.com. Again, if you haven't gotten the free subscriptions, the annual subscription to the Avail Journal, you can do that at availjournal.com. Thank you, everybody, for connecting with us. Thank you, Dan, for pouring out some wisdom and leadership experience with us. It's been a great blessing. We'll see you all next time here on the Avail Leadership Podcast.